The Politics of Hope, Donald Trump as an Entrepreneur of Identity. Stephen Reicher. School of Psychology and Neuroscience, University of St. Andrews. S. Alexander Haslam. School of Psychology, University of Queensland. To appear in M. Fitzduff, ed., The Myth of Rational Politics, Understanding the Allure of Trumpism. New York, Praeger. Address for correspondence, Stephen Reicher, School of Psychology and Neuroscience. University of St. Andrews, St. Andrews, KY169JU, UK. 2. Introduction, Making Sense of Those Who Don't Make Sense to Us. At the risk of appearing like cuckoos in the nest, we need to start by raising a concern about the title of this book, The Myth of Rational Politics. Or at least, we have a concern lest the title be seen to imply that the notion of irrationality is transferred from a political to a psychological level. It is far too easy and far too common to dismiss those whose political positions we disagree with as fools or knaves, or, more precisely, as fools led by knaves. If those on the right of the political spectrum have long had a general mistrust of the masses, which has been translated into a classic psychology according to which the individual descends several rungs on the ladder of civilization by virtue of joining the mass. Le Bon, 1895, 1947, those on the left tend to reserve their contempt for the masses when they fail to act in ways that left-wing politics suggests they should. If the poor and oppressed vote against larger government and higher taxes or for policies that pathologize and target other poor and oppressed groups, they are seen to suffer from false consciousness, to be incapable of identifying their own interests, to substitute emotion for reason, and to be afflicted by bias. See Kramer, 2016. All these tendencies are abundantly displayed in the reaction to Donald Trump's remarkable rise through the 2016 primary campaign. The inability of even the most successful pundits to grasp the reality of Trump's victory has been paralleled by an unprecedented assault on Trump and his supporters, the core of which questions their grasp on reality. For instance, in a debate in the British Parliament, responding to a petition calling for Trump to be banned from the country, the then Republican candidate was described as a buffoon, a demagogue and, more colorfully still, a whatsack one. Such assessments are paralleled by both politicians and by the general public in the U.S. itself. A Suffolk University /USA Today poll asked 1,000 people to describe Trump in their own terms. 3. The most popular response was idiot /jerk /stupid /dumb, followed by arrogant and then buffoon /clown /comical /joke too. Similar epithets are used to characterize those who vote for Trump. A report carried by the website Politics USA on the 10th of May, 2016 was headlined American Idiots, Poll Proves Trump Supporters Are the Stupidest People in the U.S. 3. The report was based on the finding that 65% of Trump supporters believe that Obama is a Muslim, 59% think he was not born in the USA, and only 13% think he is a Christian. It suggests that they have been duped by the fear, bigotry and bias of the conservative media. It repeatedly sums up their position as bigoted stupidity. The linkage of stupidity with bigotry and racism is important, for racism is generally taken as evidence of judgment without evidence, of sentiment trumping reason, of the triumph of bias. Thus the label of racism implies lack of reason even if stupidity is not explicitly mentioned. And the notion that people support Trump because of racism is very widespread. For instance, a piece by Jason McDaniel and Sean McElwee on the official blog of the Western Political Science Association argues that Trump's supporters are primarily characterized by racial resentment. An analysis on the Salon website 5 is more trenchant, as indicated by the headline, "Hideous, Disgusting Racists, Let's Call Donald Trump and His Supporters Exactly What They Are." We are reminded here of Theodore Abel's fascinating text Why Hitler Came into Power, Abel, 1938-1986, though we need to preface our observations with a comment. There has been much discussion recently of Godwin's law, the tendency, as discussion continues, to compare one's opponent or their argument to Hitler and Nazism. While invoking some amusement, this tendency is a means of seeking to silence and obliterate the other. It makes consensus impossible and thereby destroys the common ground of reasoned discussion. As such, it should be taken very seriously and indeed reflects the very tendencies we are addressing in this book. As a consequence, let us be absolutely explicit. We are not comparing Trump, his supporters or their arguments to the Nazis in any way. What we are doing is addressing some problems in the ways that we analyze and explain behaviors of which we disapprove. In 1934, Abel ran an essay competition based on autobiographies of Nazi Party members. He received around 600 responses, and from these he was able to glean the reasons why so many Germans supported Hitler. Certainly there was a fair degree of antisemitism involved. There were also some expressions of virulent hatred of Jews. And no one was unaware of the party's antisemitism and so had to be prepared, at the very least, not to object to such racism in order to support the party. In this sense, they were indeed racists. But this is very different from saying that they joined and remained in the party primarily or even partially because they were racists. Many other motives were involved: a sense of the decline of Germany, a desire to rediscover past greatness, a fear of social disorder, the desire for a strong leader. We would argue that the same is true of Trump supporters. Some, undoubtedly, are white supremacists. All are prepared to live with his statements about Muslims, Mexicans, and others. But is racism, bigotry and bias the most important explanation for why people support Trump? Or rather, are we seeing a double case of projection? First, there is a danger that our own inability to understand why people act in certain ways is transformed into the assertion that the behavior is based on their own lack of understanding. Take, for instance, attitudes to nuclear power. Lay respondents tend to be far more negative and rate this as far riskier than experts. A classic study by Slovic, Fickoff and Lichtenstein, 1981, shows that women voters and students rate this first out of a list of 30 risks, whereas experts rate it as 20th. One response is to say that this reflects biases in the way that people process 5. Information, laying far too much emphasis on dread-related risks over which we have no control and which have the potential to be catastrophic. But the notion of overestimation relies on accepting as objective the official figures about the harm done by nuclear radiation. The problem is that people don't always accept Official evidence. When, years ago, we did research with environmentalist activists, they would list examples to demonstrate why official figures are not to be trusted, nuclear accidents that were covered up and so on. Their conclusions were not based on an inability to calculate probabilities from the figures but on a rejection of those figures. By the same token, are people stupid to dismiss official evidence that Obama is an American-born Christian? To do so definitely indicates a problem, but is it a problem of intelligence or of trust? Our response parallels that of Catherine Kramer when she deals with the argument that those who vote against what analysts consider to be their interests are ignorant. I would like to suggest the possibility that the issue is not about the facts they know. Instead, the issue has to do with the perspectives through which they encounter facts and conceive of possible solutions. p. 145. In the Trump case, then, we would do well to ask what, for those who support him, these perspectives are. The second act of projection has to do with assuming that the things which most concern us about Trump are the same things as most concern those who back his campaign. Because we so abhor racism, we assume that racism lies at the center of their motivations. To risk another extreme comparison, what concerns the West about ISIS is the appalling brutality of its supporters' actions. So we focus on the obscene images of beheadings which they post online and ask why anyone is attracted to such images. Yet, a systematic analysis of ISIS propaganda shows that only about 5% of images show such brutal scenes. These may dominate the Western media, but most of the images in ISIS propaganda show scenes of 6. Group cohesion, of group triumph, of members fixing sewage systems, providing health care and education. They are portrayals of an ideal caliphate. See Lewis, 2015, see also Reicher and Haslam, 2016. So if we want to understand the ISIS phenomenon, we need to start from the experience of insiders, not that of outsiders. In the case of ISIS we need to ask why they might be attracted to an idealized caliphate more than why they are attracted to the pornography of violence. In the case of Donald Trump we need likewise to analyze the way he appeals to people and why this elicits their support. In this chapter, we plan precisely such an analysis. That is, we aim to try and get inside the Trump campaign and take seriously what we find there. We need to respect those we study if we want to understand their worldview, their preferences, and their decisions. The more distant these are from our own, the harder this becomes, but also, the more important it becomes. Yet, rather than dismiss them as senseless, we want to see how they make sense of things. That way, we may better understand how to challenge and even change their perspectives. In the next section, we look inside a Trump event to look in detail at what actually goes on. That is, we address how Trump appeals to his audience. For this, we are indebted to a particularly insightful analysis by the journalist Gwynn Guilford who, acting as an ethnographer, participated in Trump rallies across the state of Ohio in March 2016. Following that, we analyze why Trump appeals to his audience. In order to answer this question we draw upon what we have referred to as the new psychology of leadership, Haslam, Reicher and Plato, 2011. This conceptualizes effective leadership as being rooted in a relationship between leaders and followers in a social group. It therefore leads us to ask, a. How people conceptualize their group memberships, that is, how do they segment the world into we and they, b. How the leader is positioned in relationship to these groups, are they one of us or one of them, and c. How the leader's proposals are related to group interests, do they 7. Advance or retard what we want. It is Trump's skill in the C matters, we suggest, his ability to shape and respond to the collective perspective of his audience, and hence to make good sense to them, that is the secret of his success. Inside the Trump machine. A Trump rally is about more than a Trump speech. Important though his words may be, and we shall be looking at them in some detail, it is even more important to look at the event as a whole as the performance of a particular world view. Once again, the charge of irrationalism can serve to obscure this. The powerful idea that Trump crowds are mindless mobs led by primitive urges and stirred up by a narcissistic demagogue can obscure our ability to appreciate what events are telling us about the way those who are present see the world. In simple terms, a Trump rally is a dramatic enactment of a particular vision of America. Or rather, it enacts how Trump and his followers would like America to be. In a phrase, it is an identity festival that embodies a politics of hope. The rally starts long before Trump arrives. Indeed, the long wait for the leader is part and parcel of the performance. It affects the self-perception of audience members. If I am prepared to wait this long, this event and this leader must be important to me. It affects the ways audience members see each other. If others are prepared to wait this long, this event and the leader must be important to them. It thereby sets up a norm of devotion in the crowd and a sense of shared identity amongst crowd members. We are joined together in our devotion to this cause. The wait also provides time for other ritualized acts which help shape the world view of the audience. Guilford describes the security process in the events. Trump's procedures are more rigorous than those of any other candidate. At every venue, the audience pass through a metal detector gate. Inside, highly visible security agents abound. They fan out their backs to the stage and make eye contact with audience members in order to check for intruders. 8. Audience members join in the exercise. One doesn't have to express overt opposition to be suspect, so woe betide anyone who doesn't show sufficient enthusiasm. About an hour before Trump speaks, crowd members are instructed over the PA system not to touch any protesters they spot. Rather, they should alert security by chanting, "Trump! Trump! Trump!" This happens repeatedly, often a false alarm. But when it does happen, the entire audience is alerted to possible enemies in their midst. In these various ways, crowd members are induced to act as if they were under threat, and observing both themselves and others acting in this way serves to validate the presumption that they are under threat both from enemies without and enemies within. In this way, as identity festivals, the success of Trump rallies owes much to an audience who perform their devotion to Trump and to an audience and security apparatus who perform as a community under threat. Yet there is one more set of actors who, perhaps unwittingly, certainly unwillingly, play a key part in the drama. These are the media who are generally kept together behind Trump. They are positioned as a visible presence to be derided when maligned by Trump as the voice of a hostile establishment. Guilford describes one such incident. Trump scowls at the media cattle pen in the back of the room and calls the press the most disgusting and most dishonest people he's ever seen, pantomiming his disdain with an elaborate sneer before goading his supporters to turn and glare too. On cue, the crowd turns and boos. In this moment, the tables are turned. The media and establishment are no longer big and powerful. They are small and cowed by Trump's legions. All in all, even before we consider the content of Trump's speeches, his rallies bring to life a powerful representation of social relations. But the speech itself confirms and fleshes out this representation. Trump's rhetoric is largely consistent from rally to rally and can be 9. Seen as a particular example of a general form called the American Jeremiad, Berkovich. 1980. This is the notion that America has an exceptional mission in the world, but is falling short and therefore needs to change in order to fulfill its original vision. What marks out Trump's version from the original Puritan version is, first, that the failings are a matter of power and wealth rather than of moral purpose, and, second, that they are due to the depredations of others rather than our own weaknesses. More specifically, Trump's argument has three elements. The first asserts that America, once great, is now weak and repeatedly humiliated by others. So, in his presidential announcement speech, given at Trump Tower in New York City, Trump asserted, "Our country is in serious trouble. We don't have victories anymore. We used to have victories, but we don't have them. When was the last time anyone saw us beating, let's say China in a trade deal? They kill us. Or again, when did we beat Japan at anything? They send their cars over by the millions, and what do we do? When was the last time you saw a Chevrolet in Tokyo? It doesn't exist. Folks. They beat us all the time. Or yet again, when do we beat Mexico at the border? They're laughing at us, at our stupidity. And now they are beating us economically. They are not our friend, believe me. But they're killing us economically." It is worth noting too that, as examples of American decline, Trump focuses on trade. Here America's decline is primarily measured in the loss of jobs, something which he made particularly explicit in a speech at a metal recycling plant in Monessen, Pennsylvania. "We tax and regulate and restrict our companies to death, and then we allow foreign companies that cheat to export their goods to us tax-free. How stupid is this? How could 10. It happen? How stupid is this? As a result, we have become more dependent on foreign countries than ever before. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to declare our economic independence once again." The second element in Trump's argument is already implied in this last quotation. The reason for America's decline has to do with the actions of its enemies. These enemies are in part external, China and Mexico and other countries who cheat and who are corrupt and who take the jobs and wealth of ordinary Americans. To cite again from Trump's presidential announcement speech, "Our real unemployment is from 18 to 20%. Don't believe the 5.6. Don't believe it. That's right. A lot of people up there can't get jobs, because there are no jobs, because China has our jobs and Mexico has our jobs. They all have jobs. But these external enemies only thrive because of the actions of many enemies within. Sometimes, these are enemies due to their incompetence, their inability to do deals that favor America. Sometimes Trump targets particular individuals, Obama, Clinton, his Republican rivals, and sometimes he targets the political class as a whole. Hence this passage from his presidential announcement speech. I've watched politicians. I've dealt with them all my life. If you can't make a good deal with a politician, then there's something wrong with you. You are certainly not very good. And that's what we have representing us. They will never make America great again. They don't even have a chance. They're controlled fully by the lobbyists, by the donors, and by the special interests, fully. This extract points to another reason why other politicians act as enemies. They are controlled by others who are enemies to the American people. This is made even more explicit in Trump's Munising speech when he pillories his chief Democratic rival. 11. The people who rigged the system are supporting Hillary Clinton because they know as long as she is in charge nothing is going to change. The inner cities will remain poor. The factories will remain closed. The borders will remain open. The special interests will remain firmly in control. Hillary Clinton and her friends in global finance want to scare America into thinking small. In short, America is losing out because the enemy within colludes with the enemy beyond. But as well as identifying a problem and a cause to that problem, in the third part of his argument Trump also identifies a solution himself. Throughout his speeches, Trump insists on the fact that he isn't like other politicians. He knows how to make a deal, as exemplified by his book The Art of the Deal. He insists that he has been so successful and become so rich that he cannot be bought. For instance, in one of many anecdotes Trump recalls, one of the big banks came to me and said, "Donald, you don't have enough borrowings. Could we loan you $4 billion? I said I don't need it. I don't want it. And I've been there. I don't want it." As a consequence of these non-political attributes, Trump positions himself as being able to restore what America has lost. To illustrate that, let us return to Trump's presidential announcement speech and his assertion that our country is in serious trouble. We don't have victories anymore. We used to have victories, but we don't have them. When was the last time anyone saw us beating, let's say China in a trade deal? They kill us. The next line is, I beat China all the time. All the time. To this, the audience applaud and chant, "We want Trump. We want Trump." Then let us also look at the words with which Trump closes the speech. 12. If I get elected president, I will bring it back bigger and better and stronger than ever before, and we will make America great again. This significantly extends the argument through the use of the term we. Trump brings in his audience and insists that it is not just Trump but the Trump movement that will restore greatness. And this invocation of the crowd bookends the speech. Let us conclude our analysis by rewinding from the closing words to the opening words. Well. Whoa. That is some group of people. Thousands. This is beyond anybody's expectations. There's been no crowd like this. And I can tell you, some of the candidates. They went in They didn't know the air conditioner didn't work. They sweated like dogs. They didn't know the room was too big, because they didn't have anyone there. How are they going to beat ISIS? I don't think it's gonna happen. Here, our analysis comes back full circle. We see the rhetorical and the performative come together. The crowd is reflected back to itself as a demonstration of its power to achieve change. The relationship between the crowd, Trump, and threatening enemies within the event is translated into a vision of the world in general, ordinary Americans who have fallen from their rightful place in the world due to attacks from without and betrayals from the political class within, but who have the power, united behind Trump, and the will to employ it, in order to restore this place. Every thinker hears everything which is used as evidence of pathology, from the rough language and baying at foes to the devotion and reverence for one who violates all the rules of politics, makes sense within the terms and scope of this vision. It is a vision realized in its very telling. It is an enactment of Trump's new America. It is not only a politics of hope, but the lived experience of all that is hoped for. The entrepreneur of identity. As we have seen, Donald Trump makes much of his economic entrepreneurial abilities and his ability to make deals, although this has come under some critical scrutiny. 13. The ghostwriter of The Art of the Deal, Tony Schwartz, has described it as a work of fiction, and said, "I feel a deep sense of remorse that I see contributed to presenting Trump in a way that brought him wider attention and made him more appealing than he is." 6. And a report in Fortune on the 20th of August 2015 notes that Trump would have made over 4 times as much money if he simply invested his money in an index fund. 7. But whatever the truth of the matter, our argument is that Trump's political success derives from his skills as an entrepreneur of identity. By this, we mean the ability of the would-be leader to represent himself and his platform in ways that make them articulate with the ways in which his would-be followers experience their world and hence render himself representative of this world. There is much controversy over exactly who this followership is. For instance, it is often asserted that they are uneducated, white and poor. In terms of education, it is certainly true that the percentage of Trump supporters with college degrees, around 20%, is much lower than the percentage of Americans with college degrees, roughly 40%, but at the same time, in many of the primaries most Republicans with college degrees voted for Trump. 8. Equally, it is true that, on average, Trump supporters earn less than supporters of his main rivals, $72,000 versus $91,000 for Kasich, but at the same time, they earn considerably more than the median wage, $56,000, and supporters of both Clinton and Sanders, $61,000 apiece. 9. What does seem to hold, however, is that Trump supporters are primarily white, and they live in areas of long simmering economic dysfunctions. Irwin and Katz, 2016, even if they themselves are not poor. To quote further from Irwin and Katz, one element common to a significant share of his supporters is that they have largely missed the generation-long transition of the United States away from manufacturing and into a diverse, information-driven economy deeply intertwined with the rest of the world. That is, Trump's constituency consists largely of people who are part of a declining sector of an economy which is, at best, stagnating. C. 14. Smith, 2016, and who have been hit particularly hard by trade deals that open the US to competition from low-cost manufacturing elsewhere in the world. The second major factor about this constituency is their lack of trust in politics, politicians, and political institutions. They are not alone in this. A Pew Research Center report shows that overall trust in government has fallen from 74% in 1958, rising to a peak of 77% under Johnson in 1964, to a mere 19% in 2015. Only 20% of people think government programs are well run. 10. When one takes party identification into account, the figures are even more stark. Less than 10% of Republicans currently have trust in government. Even for Democrats, the figure is only a little over 30%. 11. What is more, if people feel distanced from government and that government does not represent them, there is good reason to conclude that this is rooted in their actual experience. A recent analysis, Gilens and Page, 2014, shows that, whereas economic elites and business groups have considerable influence on U.S. government policy, average citizens and mass interest groups have none. Trump's accomplishment is to take these inchoate feelings of decline and marginalization and to provide a perspective which not only makes sense of them but which, as we saw in the previous section, provides a solution to them. In so doing, he acknowledges the real problems of his audience, where others ignore them or even contribute to them. He understands them, and he empowers them to participate in the process of resolving those problems. But he does one more thing. For as we also saw previously, Trump's narrative is not only about the world and the place of his audience within it. It is also himself, about his own place and hence about his relationship to his audience. Trump's argument is a classic populist confection in which the world is divided into the common people and a privileged elite. The people are defined in national terms, as Americans, and the elite primarily in political terms. Trump's claim to leadership is rooted primarily in the work he does to position himself firmly amongst the former, and to position 15. His rivals firmly amongst the latter. This has a number of key elements which we see as key to successful identity entrepreneurship, Haslam et al., 2011. To start with, Trump construes himself of prototypical of the ordinary American. In group. Not typical. Trump is far from typical. How many ordinary Americans are worth something in the region of $4 billion, have their own tower, university and jet? No. Prototypical, which means that Trump represents the key values and attributes which distinguish the group from others. This is how Andrew Sullivan puts it. He did not hide his wealth in the late 20th century, he flaunted it in a way that connected with the masses. He lived the rich man's life most working men dreamed of. Endless glamour and women, for example, without sacrificing a way of talking about the world that would not be out of place on the construction sites he regularly toured. His was a cult of democratic aspiration. This is how Trump is described on his own website. Donald J. Trump is the very definition of the American success story, continually setting the standards of excellence while expanding his interests in real estate, sports and entertainment. And, perhaps most eloquently, this is how Trump's son described his father in his speech to the Republican convention. We didn't learn from MBAs. We learned from people who had doctorates in common sense. It's why we're the only children of billionaires as comfortable in AD 10 Caterpillar as we are in our own cars. My father knew that those were the guys and gals who would teach us the dignity of hard work from a very young age. He knows that at the heart of the American dream is the idea that whoever we are, wherever we're from, we can get ahead, where everyone can prosper again. 12. 16. So, the way Trump dresses, always immaculate in tie and expensive suit, never dressing down in jeans to pretend to be the ordinary guy, being American by signifying his success, the way he talks, the crude, undiplomatic, violent forms of expression, and what he says are not incidental. They are part of his performance as an exemplary American. What is more, they separate him equally clearly from being a typical, or prototypical, politician. What is thought to be a weakness, lack of political experience, is touted as a strength. The constant violations of the political rules, so often seen as presaging Trump's decline, actually consolidate his ascendancy. The attacks by heavyweights of the Republican establishment, Mitt Romney, George Bush, only serve to increase his poll ratings. This has caused some bemusement, but the reason is simple. To fail by the rules of politics and to be rejected by the political class only serves to consolidate a candidate's in-group status in the eyes of an anti-political audience. Most critically, in Trump's case, it confirms that he is one of us, not one of them. All this helps explain what The Guardian calls the paradox that has been at the heart of the Trump phenomenon, that is, how can a billionaire businessman from New York be the one who gets the struggling working class? 13. But it is not enough to be one of us. As we note in the New Psychology of Leadership, success also depends on being seen to do it for us by acting for the in-group interest. As we have already seen, this is one of Trump's constant refrains. Once again, his wealth acts for him as opposed to against him in this regard. He is not acting to enrich himself. We have heard Trump boasting that he has money. He has been there. He doesn't need any more. Equally, he cannot be bought to serve the interests of others, the international, i.e., non-American, elite. Whereas Hillary Clinton is enthralled to Wall Street and gets paid to speak for Wall Street, Trump is free to tell it like it is. This is something that is constantly cited as a sour CE of Trump's strength. For instance, ex-Arizona Governor, Jan Brewer, praised Trump for kind of telling it like it really truly is when he linked 17. Immigration to violent crime 14, and that constantly comes out as one of the major reasons why people vote for him. And finally, even doing it for us isn't enough if a leader lacks the support or ability to be successful in advancing the group interest. The effective leader has, above all, to make it real in the sense of turning group values into lived experience. One major challenge here is that it is clearly difficult for an aspirant to power to actually achieve anything before they have been elected. As we have seen, Trump rises to this challenge by making much of his previous successes and his credentials as an inspired business leader and deal maker. The other part of the answer lies in creating a simulacrum of reality within the very movement designed to change reality. And, again, we have seen also how carefully Trump choreographs his rallies in order to achieve precisely that. In sum, Trump's campaign is all about creating a particular sense of us, to which articulating a sense of them is critical, but secondary, and then establishing the way in which he himself is representative of the group in a symbolic and practical way so as to gain the ability to represent the group at the political level. The skill, the complexity and the subtlety with which he does this, even when it comes to his use of crudity, helps us understand why Trump proves so appealing to his audience. Conclusion. Our argument in this chapter is simple. It is that while it is easy and tempting to reject those we disagree with as either ignorant or irrational, this is a mistake. The temptation to do so becomes all the greater as the polarization between groups increases and it becomes ever harder to understand, or even want to understand, what others do. Our aim becomes to dismiss, to discredit, to obliterate rather than to understand. But if we take the effort to look at things from the perspective of the other, we generally find that, from their perspective, what they do makes sense. To do so is not to condone that perspective. It is to understand why. 18. Positions we may abhor can prove so appealing, and hence to be in a better position to properly contest them. More concretely, we contend that Trump succeeds by providing a categorical grid, a definition of groups and intergroup relations, that allows many Americans to make sense of their lived experience, to understand their problems, and to entertain the hope of being able to deal with them. In this, he establishes himself as a champion and as a voice for people who otherwise feel unchampioned and voiceless. Ironically too, in a politics controlled by wealth and privilege, his wealth frees him of the charge that he is in hock to the money men. Above all, Trump has an intuitive grasp of how to establish himself as the voice of America in both his words and his actions. What is more, Trump's successes must be seen in the light of the failure of others. Most particularly, his rivals have not succeeded in providing an alternative grid based on alternative categories to make sense of what many Americans are experiencing. They have not elaborated an alternative politics and an alternative set of solutions. In that context, Trump has had a relatively free run. This point, though, brings us to the last and strongest reason for avoiding an explanation of Trump's success, which lays the blame on his inadequacies and those of his followers. This is that, while it is cozy and reassuring, such an account avoids the deeply uncomfortable, but equally essential task of asking whether his success may not ultimately derive from our own failings. Certainly, like those pro-European Britons who woke up to news of Brexit's electoral success in June, should we wake up in November to a Trump election victory, we will need to ask what we and our leaders might, and should, have done to present a more inclusive narrative of us that deals with the real problems people face, to embody that us in all we say and do, and to develop a politics that provides solutions to those problems. 19. Biographies. Stephen Reicher is Ward Law Professor of Psychology at the University of St. Andrews, a Fellow of the British Academy, the Royal Society of Edinburgh and the Academy of Social Sciences. He has been studying issues of social identity and collective behavior for nearly 40 years, including crowd behavior, nationalism, leadership, tyranny, intergroup hatred and, latterly, obedience and resistance. Alexander Haslam is Professor of Psychology and Australian Laureate Fellow at the University of Queensland. He is a Fellow of the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research and of the Association for Psychological Science. His research focuses on the study of group and identity processes in social, organizational and clinical contexts, and he has published over 200 peer-reviewed papers on these topics. References: Abel, T. 1938–1986, Why Hitler Came into Power. Cambridge, Ma, Harvard University Press. Berkovich, S. 1980, The American Jeremiad. Madison W., University of Wisconsin Press. Kramer, K. 2016, The Politics of Resentment, Rural Consciousness in Wisconsin and the Rise of Scott Walker. Chicago, Ill., University of Chicago Press. Gilens, M. and Page, B.I. 2014, Testing Theories of American Politics, Elites, Interest Groups, and Average Citizens. Perspectives on Politics, 12, 564–581. Haslam, S.A., Reicher, S.D. and Plato, M. 2011, The New Psychology of Leadership. London, Psychology Press. Irwin, N. and Katz, J. 2016, The Geography of Trumpism. Downloaded from the Upshot on 07/19/2016. http://www.nytimes.com/2016/03//1/3//upshot/0 20. Lewis, H. 2016, The Utopia of ISIS, Inside Islamic State's Propaganda War. Downloaded from New Statesman on 3 May 2016. http://politics/uk/2015/politics/UK//2015/utopia-isis-inside-islamic-state-s- Propaganda War. Reicher, S.D. and Haslam, S.A. 2016, Fueling Terror, How Extremists Are Made. Scientific American Mind, 27, 3, 35–39. Slovic, P., Fischhoff, B., Lichtenstein, S., and Rowe, F.J.C. 1981, April. Perceived Risk. Psychological Factors and Social Implications. Proceedings of the Royal Society of London. A. Mathematical, Physical and Engineering Sciences, 376, pp. 17–34. Smith, N. 2016, Trump has a point about American decline. Downloaded from Blomberg View on 07/19/2016. https://www.bloomberg.com/view/articles/2016-03-03 Donald Trump has a point about American decline. Sullivan, A. 2016, America has never been so ripe for tyranny. Downloaded from New York Magazine on 7 July 2016. http://nyMag.com/daily/America-tyranny-Donald-Trump.html Notes. 1 reported in the British Daily Telegraph on 01/18/2016. C. http://www.telegraph.co.uk/news/world news/Trump/12105940/Donald-Trump- Muslim ban UK debate live.html 2 reported in Salon on 09/30/2015. C. http://jerk_idiot_buffoon_choose_brutal_words_to_d Escribe_Donald_Trump/ 3 http://2016/05/1045/1004/American-idiots-poll-proofs-trump-supporters-4 https://2016/03/27/ration-rise-of-Donald- Trump/ 5 reported on 03/29/2016. C. hideous_racists_let's_call_Donald_Trump_ ND_his_supporters_exactly_what_they_are/21 6 reported in the New York Times on 07/18/2016. C. http://us/politics/Trump-book-tony-schwartz.html?r=0 7 http://fortune.com/2015/08/Donald-Trump-index-funds/ 8 http://www.politico.com/story/2016/03//5-myths-about-Trump-supporters-22015/8 9 http://mythology-of-Trump's-working-class-support/ 10 http://2000/11/2023/how-americans-view-their- government/ 11 http://brookings.edu/blogs/posts/2015/09/16-Republican-debate- Heather Icto 12 For the entire speech see http://edition.cnn.com/politics/videos/politics/2016/07/RNC-convention- Donald Trump Jr. entire speech sot.cnn 13 chttps://us-news/Donald-Trump-Jr.-convention- Speech American Dream 14 http://thehill.com/ballot-box/ballot-box/presidential-races/24736-x-Arizona-governor- Trump telling it like it is.